أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse number 6, Surah Nisa. وابتلوا اليتامى حتى إذا بلغوا النكاح فإن آنستم منهم رشدا فادفعوا إليهم أموالهم ولا تأكلوها إسرافا وبدارا أن يكبروا ومن كان غنيا فليستعفف ومن كان فقيرا فليأكل بالمعروف فإذا دفعتم إليهم أموالهم فأشهدوا عليهم وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ حَسِيبًا. Test the orphans when they reach the age of marriage. Then if you discern in them maturity, deliver to them their property. And do not consume it lavishly and hastily, lest they should grow up. As for him who is well off, let him be abstemious. And as for him who is poor, let him eat in a reasonable manner. And when you deliver to them their property, take witnesses over them, and Allah suffices as reckoner. This is the last verse at the beginning of this chapter, which discusses the matter of the orphans. Previously, of course, it was said that taking care of the orphan is something very important, and people must not do injustice with regards to whatever is related to the orphans. Here, the people who are in care of orphans' affair, the awliya, whoever they are told that you must hold and retain the property of orphan and keep it for them until they come to the age of puberty. And then you have to give it to them on certain conditions. Now let's look at the details of the verse. وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ. Test the orphans when they reach the age of marriage. Now, age of marriage, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ, means, of course, puberty. فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. آنَسْتُم is from inas, uns. Inas is to sense and feel something, to understand something in something else, as we have in the story of Musa alayhi salam. إذ قال لأهلهم كثوا إني آنست نارا. I am seeing a fire. And inas is used here because other people were not seeing it. Here it means if you feel, sense, observe maturity in them, then فَادْفَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُم, deliver to them their property. The age of marriage or puberty, which is the age of course, coming to finishing the childhood in the Islamic law, is not enough to give back the property of the orphan to them, which is under one's care. First of all, the orphan cannot, as long as they are saghir, as long as they are not mature, they should not be allowed to do whatever they want with their property. It's not because they do not know how to do it. They may actually lose everything if the control is in their hand. So it is the duty of the person who is taking care of them, the wali, to keep the property for them until the age of puberty. From then on, you have to see if they come to rushd as well. فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. Rushd is maturity. rectitude, rightness. And it means growth in physical sense and growth in terms of guidance, in terms of in spiritual matters. Quran uses two different versions of this term, which have slight difference with each other. Rushd and Rashad. Rushd is, of course, maturity and rectitude in physical way and in the spiritual way, in terms of guidance and in terms of physical maturity. Here is, of course, physical, mental maturity here. فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. It's mental maturity. About Ibrahim, for example, Allah says, لَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلَ. We gave Ibrahim his rushd. That is, of course, rushd in terms of guidance, rushd in terms of understanding what's going on in the world. It's not mental maturity. It's something more than that. It means receiving correct guidance. But the Rashad is only used for correct guidance, not for physical maturity or mental maturity. Like, for example, in Surah Jinn, we have فَمَنْ أَسْلَمَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ تَحَرَّوْا رَشَدًا. Whoever submits to the Lord, they are the ones who have sought. Rashad means guidance, true guidance. Anyhow, reaching the age of maturity is very important for the orphans to be given back their property. However, that must be tested. It's not like physical maturity, age of marriage. حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ. That is something which is verifiable. They themselves can actually mention that they have reached that age. However, they have to be tested to see if they are able to deal with their property properly, not in a way that they may lose them. And that is a big responsibility on the awliya, on those who take care of them. And that's why it says, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى حَتَّى. You have to continuously test them to see if they are mature enough, until they reach the age of puberty, and afterwards you have to test them as well to see. Now, I'll talk about that test. However, about this rushd, فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. As I said, reaching the age of puberty is the end of childhood, according to Islamic law. Well, there's a difference here between end of childhood in the Islamic law and end of childhood in the modern understanding of childhood. Of course, Islam usually bases its rulings on physical and understandable, verifiable matters, not conventional. I mean, the way it talks about, the timing of salat, which is based on natural movement. Here, the end of childhood, which is age of puberty, which is again a natural matter. Now, of course, we have, in the modern era, we have made a convention that childhood ends at the age of 18. But that's a convention. It could have been less or more. You could convene it to be less or more. It's not something based on any natural matter. Here, of course, we may say that at the age of 18 may be the age of rushd rather than the end of childhood. So, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. And this may take whatever time it may. A boy may come to the age of puberty at the age of 15, but may not reach the age of maturity until 18 or 20 or even 25. That must be tested by the awliya. so that they give their property back to them. Here regarding the rushd, Tabian says, اختلفوا في معنى الرشد. The commentators have disagreed about the meaning of rushd. What does it mean? The other commentators like Suddi Qatada say معناه عقلا ودينا وصلاحا. It means in terms of reasoning, in terms of religion, and in terms of conduct. All these are indicators of rushd. And some others have mentioned that salahan fi deen wa islahan fil mal, that they are good in performing religious duties and good in knowing how to deal with their wealth. However, Shaykh Tusi here mentions that these cannot be indicators. The indicator is that he has reasonable understanding how to make business with his money. And whatever is said about religion and conduct, that's irrelevant. And then he says, he brings a hadith from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam saying that أن المراد به, what is meant by rushd is al-aql, reasoning, understanding, discerning, of course in financial matters especially, وإصلاح المال, and being able to use the wealth properly. This is the meaning of rushd. And then he says that there is an ijma and consensus that if a person is a fasiq, is a fajr, is not, doesn't have proper conduct in his day-to-day conduct, and is not religious, does not perform religious duties, that he should be barred from his property. There's nothing like that. The ijma is against it. So how do we say that we bar the yatim or orphan from his property if, for example, he doesn't have religious conduct, a good conduct, social conduct? That is irrelevant. Rushd is that when he can deal with his property in a way that he doesn't squander it and lose it. And we have a couple of narrations also in this regard. In Man La Yahduru al-Faqih, there is a hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, قال إيناس الرشد حفظ المال. That's being able to look after their property. Inas rushd, reaching that rushd and maturity, means being able to look after their property. So you are not allowed to give them back their property until you find out and verify that they are able to look after their property. And also in another hadith, which was mentioned by Shaykh Tusi as well, al-muradu bihi al-aqlu wa islahul mal. It means reason and financial management that I discussed. And this is the view of majority of the commentators. Of course, we have some narrations here which speak in a different direction. For example, in Man La Yahduru al-Faqih against Saduq reports a hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, who said, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُوهُمْ يُحِبُّونَ آلَ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِمْ أَجْمَعِينَ فَارْفَعُوهُمْ دَرَجَةً. When you see them love the household of Muhammad, then raise them, peace be upon him, then raise them a degree. Now, this is application of this in another aspect of maturity. This is not about returning their money. Even if they are not Shias, if they do not know anything about Al Muhammad, they have to return them their property. But this is talking about another aspect of maturity. And it shows that one aspect of maturity cannot substitute another aspect of maturity. Cannot take the place of another aspect of maturity. Anyhow, what the verse means by rushd, فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا فَادْفَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُمْ. until the age of childhood, reaching puberty, you have to keep their money for them. After that, you have to test them to see if they are mature enough in terms of financial management. Then you give them back their property. Now, it says, وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. It means you can test them before reaching age of maturity, constantly. But do not give them back their property. If at that age they are mature enough mentally for financial management, then give them their property. If not, then keep it until they reach the age of mental maturity. Now, one point is that the verse does not specify how one should test the orphans. Ibtila here, of course, ibtila here means ikhtibar, testing. Although it may mean that let them do something. Ibtila is this. Let them do something. And then see if they are able to manage, then give them back their money. The verse does not specify how one should test the orphans. But the goal is see if they can manage their own financial affairs independently. Now in Al-Mizan, as I said, Allah Ta'ala says the usage of the word hatta, until, shows that the guardian should continually test the orphans. And it can be through, engaging them in different financial activities. Managing a farm, or working in a farm, in a factory, or an office, or having them perform some business, some purchase, things like that, to see if they are mature enough. Now, the very idea here shows how Allah gives importance to the property of the orphan, which is under one's care. That even after the orphan has come to the age of puberty and the childhood is ended, then the guardian should take care and be sensitive about whether he can actually use the property and manage the property properly or not. And then it says, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوهَا إِسْرَافًا وَبِدَارًا أَن يَكْبَرُوا. And do not consume it lavishly and hastily, lest they should grow up. This is more about the guardians who are poor and have to consume some portion of the orphans' money to look after them and also to nourish themselves so that they can look after them. In this case, of course, they are allowed to take something of that property, a portion of that property. However, it says, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوهَا إِسْرَافًا وَبِدَارًا أَن يَأْكُلُوا. Israfan means more than is needed. This is israf. As in Majma' al-Bayan says, بِغَيْرِ مَا أَبَاهَهُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Out of what Allah has allowed you. And what Allah allows is just the minimum need that one needs. If it goes beyond it, is extravagance. Now, it means, as Majma' al-Bayan says, لا تأكلوا من مال اليتيم فوق ما تحتاجون إليه. Do not consume the property of yatim, orphan, more than what is needed. And then he says, because the wali is allowed to use, to consume from the property of the yatim, if he is or if she is in need of that, and he can take it as a sort of remuneration, as some sort of wage for what he's doing for the orphan, if of course he is in need or she is in need. Now, others have said that no, this is not allowed at all. And they say that كل شيء من مال اليتيم فهو الأكل على وجه الإسراف. Anything taken from yatim's property is israf. However, then he says this is not possible, and this is not what our madhab would, our system of law would tell us. If he is in need, he can do it. Bidar and mubadara are two masdar infinitives. Bidar and mubadara means to compete, to go ahead of something. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوهَا إِسْرَافًا وَبِدَارًا. Bidar here means that when one competes with someone or something else to reach a goal sooner, before that. Now, in this case, competition is with what? Competition is with أَن يَكْبَرُوا, that they might grow up. You say, let me consume it before he grows up, so that I don't need to give it back to him, or I have used a great portion of it. Sometimes people think devilishly in these manners. Now, Tabari reports from Ibn Abbas that it means do not try to outdo them by snatching their property before they come to the age of maturity, mental maturity. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوهَا إِسْرَافًا وَبِدَارًا. Then, of course, it explains this, that this is, of course, for the needy ones, that they can use. For the rich guardians and those who take care, they are not allowed to use yatim's property, even in the form of remuneration or anything like that. وَمَنْ كَانَ غَنِيًّا فَلْيَسْتَعْفِفْ. If the guardian is rich and solvent, then he should refrain altogether from using the property of the orphan. And ghani, what's the meaning of ghani? Well off. Of course, it doesn't mean very rich. It means anyone who can live by the minimum who they have and pays basic living expenses. That's ghani in this sense. So anyone who can pay for the expenses, they are not allowed to take any property of the yatim. وَمَنْ كَانَ فَقِيرًا فَلْيَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. And if the guardian is needy, then they can consume in a reasonable manner. فَلْيَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Now, if you look at this is very fair and balanced advice that neither puts the guardians under pressure nor permits them to plunder and devour the property of the orphans. فَمَنْ كَانَ غَنِيًّا فَلْيَسْتَعْفِفْ وَمَنْ كَانَ فَقِيرًا فَلْيَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Now, in يَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, there are a few slightly different views. Now, what if the property of the orphan is sufficient only to feed the orphan, to take care of the orphan, and not sufficient for the needy caretaker? In that case, the guardian should not take from the property of the orphan. Only the orphan, he's only allowed to use it to feed the orphan on that, feed and clothe the orphan. So the orphan has priority over that. Now, in Tahdhib, reporting from Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, وَمَنْ كَانَ فَقِيرًا فَلْيَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, he says that ذَاكَ رَجُلٌ يَحْبَسُ نَفْسَهُ عَنِ الْمَعِيشَةِ. This is about a person who's who's not looking after his own business. He's looking after property of the orphan, doing business with it, accruing benefit for it. And because of that, he is not able to do business for himself. In that case, فَلَا بَأْسَ أَنْ يَأْكُلَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. There's no harm if he, of course, reasonably use the money of the orphan. But فَإِنْ كَانَ الْمَالُ قَلِيلًا فَلَا يَأْكُلْ مِنْهُ شَيْئًا. If the wealth or the property is little, it should only be used for the orphan. In another narration from Sa'd alayhi salam, he says that if a person assumes responsibility of any property of orphans while he is needy himself and has nothing to live on, then as long as he goes after receiving what is owed to the orphans and looks after their land, he can take off their property as much as he needs without extravagance, no israf. But if their property does not engage him from taking care of himself, then he should not take anything from their property. And in another view, which is also mentioned in hadith, is that فَلْيَأْخُذْ مِنْ مَالِ الْيَتِيمِ قَدْرَ الْحَاجَةِ وَالْكِفَايَةِ عَلَى جَهَةِ الْقَرْضِ. Anything he takes from the property of the yatim should be like a loan that he is taking and should give it back. He owes it back to the orphan. فَإِذَا دَفَعْتُمْ إِلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فَأَشْهِدُوا عَلَيْهِمْ. And when you deliver to them their property, take witnesses over them. Now here Razi says, the advice given here is the advantage of both the orphan and the guardian. That there's no dispute. Having proper documentation repels any disputes and ensures that the guardian have fully delivered the orphan's property. In Majma' al-Bayan, Tabrasi looks at this in a very beautiful manner. He says, فَانْظُرْ إِلَىٰ حُسْنِ نَظَرِ اللَّهِ لِلْيَتَامَى وَالْأُوسِيَا. Look at God's utmost affection and care for the welfare of his servants, which both the orphans and the Usia, the caretakers, the guardians. And this illustrates his kindness in all his injunctions. In fact, this tells us how kind he is in his rulings, how we can extend this to other rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and see how kind he is. I have mentioned this once before, that a hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, who said, Al-Quran ظاهره تقريب وباطنه تقريب. The Quran, the apparent side of the Quran is like rebuke all the time, saying you will be punished, things like that, talking about hell. But the interior of that, beneath that, is the sense of taqreeb and bringing close. If Allah does not care about who's doing what, then why should he bother to rebuke them, to call them? And this is one very manifest instance of that. In other words, one should infer from such wisdom and mercy that all of God's جميع عباده في أمور معاشه ومعاده, God's command are for one's own benefit in all aspects of their ma'ash and ma'ad, living in this life or ma'ad. Okay, the verse ends with the beautiful tag, وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ حَسِيبًا. Allah is sufficient as reckoner. So taking witnesses, taking record of orphans' property, being careful about it, and when you give them back their property, take witnesses, is only for worldly legal matters, for the affairs of your interaction in this world. However, of course, the best reckoner is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this sentence can also be a warning against those who hasten to consume the property of the orphan lavishly. That be careful that Allah is the best reckoner. People may not see you doing that, but Allah is the best reckoner. In Tabrasi, just a final comment here, Tabrasi says that just as you keep records of your transactions with orphans so that they may not hold any claims against you, you should also be wary of God and His reckoning, because indeed He will hold you accountable for your deeds on the day of judgment. And you cannot cheat. You may be able to cheat in this life, but you cannot cheat Him in Akhirah. Okay, that's the end of our comments on this verse. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَّدُنكَ رَحْمَةً إِنَّكَ أَنتَ الْوَهَّابُ وَصَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِهِ الطَّاهِرِينَ.